Welcome to the Question Table, a podcast of the Way Home Ministries. I'm your host, Sylvia Geronimo. I live in a place where winters can last 9 months, or at least they feel like they are lasting 9 months. For most of the year, we are indoors. We are watching the snow fall, watching the sky stay gray, and we begin to dream about sunshine. I start imagining warm days and open windows and the smell of grass again. And every winter, I find myself making the same promises. I say this will be the year. When the weather turns, I'm going to be outside all the time. I'll plant flowers, I'll grow herbs in beautiful pots, I'll trim the hedges, prune the trees, cultivate the soil. I'll become one with nature, and it's going to be glorious. And then the first warm day does finally come. The sun is out, the air smells like possibility, and I head outside with the enthusiasm of a pioneer claiming new territory because I'm ready. This is going to be my season. And 2 hours later, I'm done. I'm done for the year. I wish I could tell you I have a farmer's bone in my body, but I don't. I can't boast of a green thumb. In fact, the opposite might be true. I was definitely not born for hard labor, and gardening is hard labor. So by mid-June, my entire gardening strategy becomes this: survival of the fittest. I look at my plants and my shrubs and my flowers and my trees and I say, good luck, my darlings. I hope you make it. And if tending the garden is hard, then weeding is even harder because I hate weeds. And I suspect you do too, because they're nasty things. They are pernicious and persistent. My husband does his best to prepare the soil and to set up the flower beds and to prevent weeds from taking over. But all it takes is one ray of sunshine, one drop of rain, 1 degree warmer today than yesterday, and suddenly those pesky green leaves are shooting out of the ground like arrows. And they don't grow politely. They grow fast. They grow aggressively. They grow with a kind of confidence that says, we own this place now. By the end of the week, it looks like you're living in the land of Jack and the Beanstalk. You start to wonder if a giant has moved into your neighborhood because the weeds have outgrown everything else. They have overtaken every living thing in sight. And watching this happen every year, well, it started me thinking about another kind of weed. The weed of bitterness and the weed of resentment. Which brings me to the question of today. How good are you at weeding? Bitterness or resentment is very much like a weed. It can lie dormant underground, hidden in the garden of your life. You might not see it for months and sometimes even years. And you might think everything is fine. The ground looks clear and the garden looks peaceful. But it doesn't take much for bitterness or resentment to surface. All it takes sometimes is the mention of that person's name, or a story that someone tells, or driving past a place that you have avoided for a long time. Maybe a memory you thought was long buried that suddenly rises up again. And just like that, something shoots up through the soil. That old hurt, that old conversation, that moment you felt shamed or misunderstood or dismissed, suddenly you are standing in that place again, and you are reliving the moment. And there you go, the wound is open again. And bitterness begins to grow, and resentment begins to push through. And it grows quickly too. It's faster than the flowers, it's faster than gratitude, and it's faster than joy. And before you know it, it has spread into the neighborhood of your heart. It moves into your thoughts, it sits at your dinner table, it takes up residence in your conversations and in your prayers and in your imagination. And if left unchecked, bitterness begins to dominate the landscape. It crowds everything else. It sucks up the nutrients meant for joy. It chokes the roots of gratitude, and it spreads above ground and below ground. Because bitterness is persistent and resentment is unyielding. And if we are honest, sometimes we almost feel justified letting it grow. But bitterness is not harmless. It's like poison ivy. Left alone, it spreads and it hurts. And the only real antidote to bitterness or resentment is forgiveness. But forgiveness is hard work. It's hard labor. Forgiveness is not something most of us do once and then we are finished with it. Forgiveness is more like weeding. It takes daily work. You don't just clear the garden once and say, well, that should take care of it forever, because no gardener would think that way, because they know that the weeds come back. And forgiveness often works the same way. But forgiveness comes with something else. It comes with honesty. And this is where a voice like Brené Brown has been helpful for many of us. In her book, Rising Strong, she talks about writing what she calls the shitty first draft. She got that from Anne Lamott, and I love Anne. I love Brené. They are honest. It's the unfiltered version of the story that we are telling ourselves. It's the raw truth before we tidy it up. And sometimes forgiveness begins right there. It's that ugly first draft. It's that prayer that is not polite, but it's that prayer that is honest. Sometimes I find myself praying that way, and sometimes I find myself journaling that prayer, where I say, Lord God, in your power, I forgive my neighbor for being such a jerk. And then I list the offenses. I list all those people that I need to forgive. I write them down the way a child used to have to write lines on the chalkboard at school, over and over again, all the things they did, all the things that hurt, all the things that still sting. And sometimes that list is long. Sometimes the honesty surprises even me. Sometimes I even discover how angry I am towards God in those pages. But I find that honesty in that way, that shitty first draft, that honesty clears the ground. Because once the weed is visible, then I can pull it out. And therefore, then comes the second part of the prayer. Lord, pull out each weed of bitterness, and in its place plant a seed of mercy. This is where forgiveness begins to look like gardening, not just weeding. Where bitterness once grew, now I can plant something else. I can plant blessing or mercy or goodwill. Instead of rehearsing the wound, I begin to pray something like, Lord, bless my neighbor with joy. Lord, bless them with peace. In your mercy, let their life flourish. And this doesn't always feel natural at first, because this is hard work. But every act of forgiveness is like pulling a weed from the ground, and every blessing is like planting a seed in its place. Where weeds were curses, mercy becomes blessing, and slowly the garden begins to change. So what's the question beneath the question? Today's question is simple, but it's not easy. How good are you at weeding? Not weeding the garden outside your house, but the garden inside your heart. When bitterness appears, do you notice it? When resentment shows up, do you feed it or do you weed it? Do you name it? Do you dare to pull it out? Because forgiveness often asks us to do something brave, to forgive again and again, and sometimes again, even when we thought we were already done with it. Sometimes the weed pushes back through the ground of peace we worked so hard to cultivate. And when that happens, the work begins again. But each time we forgive, something beautiful happens. We create space where mercy can grow, and where peace can take root, and where bitterness once dominated the landscape, now space does. So perhaps today is a good day to walk slowly through the garden of your life and notice what is growing there. Notice the flowers. Notice the places where joy has taken root. Notice where gratitude is abundant. But also notice the weeds. The ones that appear quietly. The ones you've been stepping around. the ones you've been ignoring, the ones that have been growing taller than everything else. And instead of pretending that they weren't there, that it's just too hard to work, maybe today is the day to begin the quiet work of weeding. Pull the bitterness up gently but firmly. Pull up resentment by its root. Name the hurt honestly and write the messy first draft that you need to. And then, one prayer at a time, plant something new in that place. The space is open now for you to plant mercy and a seed of blessing and forgiveness, because gardeners are never perfect. But with patient tending, they can become places where life grows again. So I'll leave you with the question we started with. How good are you at weeding?